The pursuit of happiness in a land of opportunity. It's our nation's birthright, supported by laws that make it so. And yet a group of people realized it's hard to find opportunity when you're hungry, or your roof leaks, and you're working 2 or 3 jobs just to put food on the table. A team of attorneys had a vision to give voice to these citizens, low-income South Carolinians who do not have representation before lawmakers and seats of power. And South Carolina Appleseed Legal Justice Center was born. Just as momentum was building, the funding disappeared and the effort almost died. Passion, however, isn't fed by money. It doesn't become discouraged by the closing of doors. So while working from a donated office, the team focused on cases that would affect policy, seeking ways to make an impact on poverty as a whole, and slowly people started to take notice. Through the dedication of a remarkable board of directors and staff, decision makers in South Carolina finally got a glimpse behind the label of poor and saw the person, the family, the child with promise. South Carolina Appleseed became a powerful voice for those in need, improving the lives and opportunities for the most vulnerable in our state by emphasizing that equality is not a privilege, but a right.
This morning, we are absolutely delighted to have with us Sue Berkowitz, the director of the South Carolina Appleseed Legal Justice Center based in Columbia. Sue has decades of activism and advocacy for those in need and those marginalized by our legal and government systems in South Carolina. In 2018, the South Carolina Bar Foundation honored Sue with a statewide Durant Distinguished Public Service Award, one of the most prestigious statewide honors that members can bestow on a fellow attorney for meritorious service to the law and community. So this was an award given by her peers. With that biography in mind, thank you for joining us, Sue. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and thanks so much for having me. And it's a great way to start the weekend.
Awesome. During the course of our email exchanges last week, you replied to one of my emails with just a few words, quote, "It's been a week." And that was the only response. Can you describe to me and to our members here what a typical week is like for you?
I wish I could tell you I ever had a typical week. So I say that, I premise with that, but, since the pandemic, it really has been very, very different for us, partly because all of my office is working remotely, and we're trying to do all of our work by Zoom and especially when you're doing community work and trying to organize people and really bring people on board so that impacted communities are participating. It makes it a bit of a challenge to do that part of our work. But the other piece of it has been trying to, we normally don't do one-on-one legal assistance. We're a systemic legal organization. We're trying to do things up at the State House or work with state agencies, because what we want to do is, not that we don't think one-on-one legal assistance is important, it's critical, but what we try to do is work on systems so that lots of people get helped. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, we can't ignore the one-on-one, but we always look at, by working with individuals, it helps us understand what the problems are, as well as thinking about what needs to be done to help folk. And one of the things that has just been so frustrating has been how many people are spiraling really from holding on into poverty, and the lack of response from some of our state agencies. And I think you got me at a particularly low moment when I was dealing with the Department of Employment and Workforce, which is the agency that administers the unemployment insurance benefits. And they make it incredibly hard for people to penetrate the program. They are not particularly concerned when people email them and say, I've been waiting 3 months, I can't get a response, I'm on the phone, and it just makes me really angry. And I think I had sent a number of terse emails I was on an email group with about 30 other people, most of them due employees and a number of legislators. And I just said, we all have a place to sleep. We have a guaranteed paycheck. We have food on the table. Nobody should have to wait 3 days, let alone 3 months.
Right.
Also address issues. We have a huge housing crisis in South Carolina. We had one of the highest eviction rates in the country to begin with before the pandemic. In fact, North Charleston has the highest eviction rate per capita in the country.
The Post and Courier did an excellent expose on the eviction mill that is North Charleston.
Yes.
And it's just incredible that practice, and I'll put a link in our meeting notes to that article if people can get past the paywall, but it's absolutely depressing that this was allowed to exist for as long as it has, and still is allowed to exist.
It is still allowed right now because of the moratorium, the CDC moratorium. We have mechanisms to keep people from being evicted. But, if Congress does not pass the president's relief bill, we're going to see people starting to get evicted again at the end of this month. And in addition, if Congress does not pass the relief bill, starting March 14th, people who are getting unemployment benefits, their benefits will run out again.
Right.
And so one of the things we've been doing is pushing through social media and through our email. We have a email database. We get information out to people when phone calls need to be made, when our legislators need to be pushed either on a state level or a federal level. And everybody needs to be contacting both of our U.S. senators, even though, I got an email back from Tim Scott and it was very disappointing. But
I think we all have one of those letters from Tim Scott. Yes.
Yeah. But you know what? If we don't tell them what we want, then we have no one to blame but ourselves. So
would it be fair to characterize the Legal Justice Center as something of a lobbying organization, or is it more than that?
We do lobby, but that's, as much as people see that as sometimes our higher profile work, it's a very, it's not actually a huge piece of what we do, but we do lobby. We've got 3 lawyers that are registered to go up to the South Carolina State House. And we have always looked at ourselves as, when we're meeting with the community, we want to make sure we have all tools available for folks. But the nice thing is we have one more tool because we're lawyers. So if all else fails and we know that the laws are not being followed, we can also bring litigation, which we have a number of pieces of litigation in our portfolio. For example, we brought a litigation, it's almost 6 years now, against the Department of Social Services for all the problems with the foster care system because of children just languishing, going into the system because we don't take care of our children well enough as a state and give parents the resources they need. And then they get taken and put into the foster care system. And we had one of the highest rates of kids going into group homes and just languishing. So 6 years ago, we brought litigation against Governor Haley and the South Carolina Department of Social Services. And Richard Gergel, we brought it down in Charleston. Richard Gergel is the judge, and we ended up with a settlement agreement. And, we're probably, at my age, I'll probably be retired before the settlement agreement is been complied with completely.
Well, may that not happen. Number one, may the settlement complete sooner rather than later. And 2, may you never retire. So tell me about the South Carolina Appleseed Legal Justice Center. How long has that been incorporated in South Carolina?
Well, we have been around it is now, it'll be 42 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And before my time. It started as what we call a state backup center for the legal aid programs. Legal aid is the one-on-one legal assistance for low-income folk, and they're funded by the Legal Services Corporation in D.C. Well, in 1996, Newt Gingrich, when he took over Congress and decided that I called it the contract on America. He called it the contract with America. I always say we were one of the hits. And the one thing that he hated more than poor people were lawyers that represent poor people. So they put some major cuts into Legal Services Corporation, and they cut all the funding for the state and national backup centers for that expertise. So we went to the South Carolina Bar Foundation, and they gave us some additional money to keep ourselves going. The law school let us move in. We were the relatives that came for the weekend and stayed for 4 years. And we went from 5 people down to 1, me, and we built ourselves back up. And, there's nothing more liberating than having everything taken away and and knowing what it's like to try to build it back up. And we now have 6 attorneys and a couple organizers and someone to do communications for us. And we have an attorney who only works on immigration policy work and works with the immigrant community. We have another attorney who only works on education, Medicaid. In fact, we're going to be partnering with a lot of groups to get Medicaid expansion efforts going again, since in the president's bill, there's a really nice, sweet pot of money for the holdout states or the non-expansion states that I just don't think our state should or could afford to turn away.
No. It's the site for the Appleseed Foundation or the Justice Center that you run is a wealth of information. There is treasure trove of resources that I reached out to quite often when I was looking up things like voter rights and, for those that have done their time in prison and ex-felons and what their rights are, use that information and spread that around throughout Greenwood County. So given that it's a wealth of information and a techie guy like me can get to it rather easy, how do we get that type of information out to, I would say, the targets that they're really intended for, the disenfranchised, those that don't have internet access, those that don't speak English as a first language? How do you get beyond the website and out into the hands of the people that actually need it?
That is a great question, and it's something that we've worked really hard at over the years. I will say a lot of our information is both in English and Spanish now.
Yes. Much credit to you there.
And all our COVID information is in Spanish because we recognize that we have to be communicating with the community. The good news is that it also looks okay on a smartphone, so people can access it through their smartphone. And the other thing that we do, and I was actually working with our policy analyst today because we're working on how does the budget process work in South Carolina? Because we want people to understand that, because if people don't understand how the budget process works, how can they use their voice in that? And so we try to write all of our materials really between a 5th and 7th grade reading level, because we don't want people to be intimidated or reading it and going, what does this mean? I know I got a letter sent to me by a woman who is having her benefits cut off by due, and I emailed the lobbyist for due, and I said, I think I'm a fairly intelligent individual. I don't know what you're asking of her and what this means, and you need to write this in plain English. And he didn't. I was trying to be nice about it, but he just refused to. He said, just tell them to call the call center. And which means then you sit on a phone for 3 hours waiting for somebody to pick up. So we're very intentional about writing our materials so they're actually very readable. And then working with community partners, we do a lot of work to try to push that information out. They are easily downloadable, and so we really do work with a lot of the service providers and say to them, it's not there just to sit on a website. Download it, print it out, hand it out to everybody you can.
You bring
think
up
of.
a good point, because that means the responsibility is not just the Justice Center's responsibility. It's our responsibility. And
Exactly.
fortunately, on these virtual breakfast meetings that we've been holding for the past year, we've been attracting fellow chairs from other counties and other activists across the state. And so I encourage you, and I'm talking to you right now, take a look at what's available on their website and use that in your toolbox to help get that information out to the people you know in your community that need it. You know, back in 2015 BT, and BT stands for Before Trump, you wrote a letter.
It's hard to remember that, right?
Yeah. You wrote a letter to the editor to the state newspaper, and the title was, "It's Time to Make Ending Hunger and Poverty a Priority." And one of the things that you were writing to, or the people you were writing to, was the U.S. House Speaker Paul Ryan. Boy, that's a name that I've completely forgotten. And U.S. Senator Tim Scott. They were hosting a poverty forum in Columbia for the Republican presidential candidates. And you were pleading to make hunger and poverty a priority in their platform. So here we are, one full presidential cycle later, and new leadership in South Carolina, because we've got a new governor and leaders in Columbia since then. How have things changed since those hopeful words you wrote 5 years ago?
Well, I have to say we had a bit of a setback for about 4 years. I mean, I will say under the previous administration, we spent most of our time fighting to keep bad things from going forward. And we were pretty successful and when I say we, I mean collectively, the advocacy community around the country. I actually not only wrote that op-ed, I actually went to that forum because they were alleging that they were going to be ending poverty. And it was it was not a sharing of information. They would not allow anybody ask questions or challenge any of the premises that they were trying to push forward. But we, you know, it's even pre-pandemic, we were still hurting incredibly badly, especially South Carolina as a state. As you know, we have not expanded Medicaid, and we have a huge healthcare gap where there's about 188,000 people who cannot afford health insurance, can't get into the exchange, and are not eligible for Medicaid. Hunger is still prevalent with children. It's about 20% of our kids go hungry. With adults, it's not quite as much. It's about 25%. And, you know, there have been some policies that have been passed that, for example, the Henry McMaster never heard of a bad idea that he didn't want to incorporate. So as soon as the Trump administration said that, oh, we'll make work requirements for Medicaid, before he even talked to his Medicaid director, he was going to have a press conference about doing that. The good news is that the new administration has already sent letters to all the states that have work requirements for Medicaid and said, no, this is not this is not in our belief system. We also think it's illegal.
I got one last question for you then. And I appreciate the time and the information you've given. Absolutely enlightening. Of course, as a political party, we believe that we can enact positive change by placing compassionate, educated, hardworking, and qualified leaders in public office. Now, Sue, you seem to meet all of those criteria, as well as having directly worked on South Carolina legislation since the 90s. Have you ever considered running for a state position or even a federal one? Because I hear there may be an opening in the U.S. Senate in 2022. There may be a good opportunity to return a certain person's letter. Has that ever crossed your mind?
It really hasn't. You know, what motivates me is working directly with the community and helping to provide information and support and technical assistance and legal assistance to the community. And the other piece is, I know, you know, and I don't know how, you know, and there's so many elected officials that I do admire who are doing the right thing, but compromise is not necessarily in my vocabulary. So
hey,
I think I'm much better. I think I'm much better as an advocate. So, but thank
Very
you.
good.
That is very flattering. But I think I'm doing the work that I'm meant to do.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for the time you spent. This was a great delight, and we appreciate the time.
Well, thank you for asking me, and thank you for all everyone is doing. You know, we're all in this
We are.
together, and we can make South Carolina the better state we know it can be.
All right. Thank you. Have a great morning, Sue.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.